let me ask you this, and this might be like a little United States centric, but I feel like it's all around the world too. Do you think in some cases, maybe not so much in academia amidst economists, but kind of in the political realm, do you think there's a certain amount of willful ignorance? Because I mean, I think the argument can be made, and I've heard it been made by other people, where MMT is already being put in practice. It's just being put in practice for the rich and the powerful. And we saw it through this pandemic where it's like, hey, what do you need, Wall Street? What do you need, banks? What do you need, airlines? We'll just move the decimal point wherever you want. But for the people, ooh, how are we going to pay for that? So in some ways, MMT is just, and I know this is totally an oversimplification, but for theme's sake, it's taking that concept that is already benefiting the richest among us and saying, hey, we can use this same concept to give everyone healthcare and for a Green New Deal and for things that actually help everybody. So do you think there's a willful ignorance going on?
It's complicated. There's a mix of factors, but you're absolutely right. MMT just describes the system as it is. It is genuinely the case that a high proportion of academic economists around the world really do not understand the monetary system. There are, I'm sure, some people, including some very famous economists, who willfully misrepresent the system, and you'll see some of them interviewed on movies like, if anybody's ever seen the documentary from the Great Recession, Inside Job. That's a great documentary about what led up to that. You'll see some famous economists being interviewed there, one or two of whom were on the Federal Reserve Board at the time. So yeah, it's a mix. I think the majority of my colleagues, it's difficult to explain if you haven't had an economics education, but the people that find it most difficult to accept the validity of the modern monetary theory frame are trained economists, because we genuinely, some of what we learn is useful. But some of what we learn as we go through mainstream economics degree is just really, well, what do I want to say? It's not useful at all and misleading. And they come out of this training thinking that this very abstract model of a world completely different to the world that you and I live in is the correct description of the way the world actually works. So I don't think they're all dishonest. As far as politicians are concerned, again, I don't want to be rude. I often talk to politicians. I was yesterday, and some of them are incredibly bright and sharp people. And most of them, when they go into politics, at least initially do it with the best of motives.
That might be true where you live. That's not true where I live. Not in my experience. My experience has been the opposite, and that's just me being honest. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just being honest.
No. Well, all right. Let me just go a bit further. Don't endow them with more intelligence than they've actually got. A lot of them genuinely, and you'll find this. If people have read Stephanie Kelton's Deficit Myth, they'll find this. A lot of them genuinely don't understand the system. When it is explained to them, and there is a story in Stephanie's book of her and Warren talking about MMT to a progressive Democrat who sits there uncomfortably for quite a while, and then at the end of the conversation his eyes light up and finally gets it, he understands it all, but then he says, I can't say that. And there's a story in Warren's book about him at an event during the 2000 presidential campaign, sitting next to Al Gore. And Warren, Al Gore turns to Warren and says, how am I going to spend the surplus when I'm president? And Warren says to Al Gore, you're not going to have a surplus when you're president. That's not the way the monetary system is going to work. The government can only run a surplus if the private sector goes further into debt and runs a deficit. And Warren Mosler was explaining, well, it's impossible. That's going to happen. And so Warren explained modern monetary theory to Al Gore, and Al Gore apparently was a good student. By the end of the conversation, got what Warren was saying. But then he stood up and gave the speech, and the speech was as though he'd never had the conversation with Warren. They feel like they can't say these things. Sometimes it's for corrupt reasons, you're right. Sometimes it's because they're representing interest groups or contributors or people that they want to work for later on. Sometimes it's because they're terrified of Rupert Murdoch, who has been the most powerful man in the world over the past 30 years. Not Donald Trump, Rupert Murdoch. He's been the man.
From your neck of the woods.
From Adelaide. News International.
Oh, I knew it was Australia. I didn't know it was Adelaide.
No, News International was founded in Adelaide. And when it moved to New York, the company, its headquarters, it moved from Adelaide to New York. So I am in the city. We gave the world the Murdoch empire and all that. I apologize to the world.
That's okay. That. You know, you guys can fix it right now. You just have that never-ending fringe, like I recommended, and let people in.
No, he might come back.
He might come too. That's the problem.
Actually, you met a colleague of mine, Phil Lawn, ecological economist, when you were here. Phil's mum used to work for Rupert Murdoch.
No kidding.
She was his secretary years and years and years ago.
Does she have stories?
She's not with us anymore. I'm
okay.
Sad to say, but that was when he was a small-time local newspaper proprietor in Adelaide. But yes, they're scared of the media. They're scared of the people that give them contributions, especially in the US, where, of course, there's a huge amount of money and lobbying that goes into politics. Sometimes they want a job from these people. Very often, though, with politicians, well, I guarantee that if we were to make up a short set of multiple choice questions on how the monetary system works, and we were to give it to the guys in Congress in Washington, D.C., the majority of them would get most of the questions wrong. And they wouldn't get them wrong deliberately. They just, I suppose they don't have any reason to understand how the system works, and they go through life not knowing. It's convenient not to know. But.
No, I think you're right. I mean, even something like Wall Street, which, I mean, you know, someone like me, I am as against Wall Street as one can be. But if you're going to be a politician, you have to understand how it works. Like you have to really, and I don't know all the, like, every single in and out of it, but you have to make policy that's going to, you know, be better for society. You have to understand how Wall Street works in the contemporary United States. If you don't, it'd be like trying to be a race car driver, but you don't know what a steering wheel does.
These people are very often now just trying to keep their jobs, as we've seen with all the Republicans that have said nothing as Donald Trump has got more and more crazy over time. They're just trying to keep their jobs. And again, I understand this to an extent, but I've had conversations with politicians in Australia where I've explained this stuff to them, and we've got to a certain point, and they then said they didn't really want to hear anymore because the phrase you often get is, "It's above my pay grade." That's the way. So
you make laws. You make laws.
Well, no.
What you do.
The Prime Minister makes the laws. I just turn out and vote.
Well, not you, but I mean, yeah. I meant the politicians.
No. I mean the politicians. When you say that,
right? But still,
they just vote the way they're told very often.
That is what they would say to me in response to that.
Yeah, but absolutely. But we are making progress, and in the US, you're making a lot of progress, and there are an increasing number of progressives inside and outside the Democratic Party. You have to be inside the Democratic Party to get elected, the way things are federally. There are some great people.
That changes.
Yeah, there are some great people. I have an immense amount of confidence and belief in people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and in the next generation. I just hope that they have a fair chance. I hope that we haven't passed on to them a world which is very difficult to deal with because of all the ecological damage that we've caused, as well as, all the other elements of injustice. And the sooner we get things right, the better, which is why a lot of us, and people like Fadel Kaboub, who I didn't mention before in the US, are we're working ourselves to distraction. There are a small group of us around the world who are permanently exhausted at the moment because we're just pushing everywhere we possibly can push. A federal job guarantee we're pushing for. We managed to get the Tasmanian state government to pass a motion, or state parliament to pass a motion to investigate a job guarantee. But of course, you need it to be done federally. I'm trying to do something similar to that in South Australia. If we can get all the states and territories to ask for one, maybe at a federal election, we can turn it into an issue. If only the candidate had been Bernie Sanders, the US would have been months away from a federal job guarantee now, and from everything else in the Green New Deal. So it was just too tough. He did
so painful.
He did the best that he could do, but it was just too difficult. And sometimes somebody has to try and fail before somebody can try and succeed. And he got close.
He did. I mean, at the end of the day, and I'm not going to sit here and say I agree with every step Bernie took. I certainly didn't. There were a lot of things that disappointed me immensely. But I think at the end of the day, we needed a reformer to be a revolutionary, and that's just not the way the world works. The reformer needs other people to be the revolutionaries, and we weren't, for whatever reason, and I don't think you can point the finger at one particular element or person or anything else, but we weren't able to have that gelling to be enough that it could overcome the nonsense that he was faced with. Because, I mean, it was not a legit primary in 2016. It was not a legit primary in 2020. And, now we are where we are. And when you look at what especially happened recently in different parts of the world, you think, wow, we could be weeks away from a Bernie Sanders presidency. It hurts. It really hurts, Stephen.
If we can turn things around in the years to come, then the history books of the future will have Bernie Sanders as an immense figure. I think that we're only going to appreciate. I don't agree with everything he said and did, and he certainly didn't always use an MMT. He never really used an MMT frame when discussing the issues that we wanted.
He likes Stephanie Kilton though a lot.
He does, yes, he does, and that story is told in Stephanie's book. And it's very difficult when you've been talking like a fiscal conservative for 50 years to turn around and start using a new frame in public once you're aware of it. To an extent he did, but not to the extent we would have liked. But when people are critical of Bernie, I'd just like to say, name anybody else that's made such an important contribution when it comes to creating a just and sustainable future world in the last 50 years, and you cannot really. So he's an immense figure.
Well, what he did here, which is something I'll always be thankful for, is he was just in the right place at the right time and showed us that we weren't as alone as we thought we were, that the political thumb of the United States is not quite what we thought it was. Because of Bernie Sanders, I learned that there's more people who think like me than I realize. I learned that, it really is, our electoral politics are really rigged worse than I thought. They're really, completely bought even worse than I thought, to the point where I think it's fair to say the United States is a complete corporate coup. And I think Bernie, because of the rhetorical situation of 2016 and then again in 2020, he really was a prominent figure in waking the country up to that. So, what's going to happen next? Unfortunately, no matter what happens, we're not quite going to have an ally in the White House no matter what, but there's a lot we can do locally.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and